You have to go across the street. Any of people.
His lawyers and his brothers and other people in Israel who are part of the Israeli support movement. So I will talk about this wonderful session we had this afternoon. People who came out, the talk by our Japanese visitor and our
I will be, again, so grateful to be able to carry Louise's map with me on November 1st as well.
We'll have it.
Great.
Thank you, Cynthia, and Godspeed to you on your trip to The Hague, and our hearts and hands will go with you on that trip, and thank you for all that you're doing. Is there anybody else who would like to give greetings to us or to the Israeli embassy, have a personal message for Yitzhak Rabin or Shimon Peres? They're both in town. How about the Jewish Committee on the Middle East? They have a representative here with Mark Brzezinski. Would you like to say hello?
He's across the street doing some videoing.
Okay.
Hi, well, it's good to see you. Good to see you again. What's happened to us? It's always good to be with friends.
Elaine, Mark, and friends. Three secrets.
God promises peace to us if we do not go back to our foolish ways. Surely God is ready to save those who honor her, and her saving presence will remain in our land. Love and faith.
Okay. We're here with Sam Day. Sam's from Madison, Wisconsin. He is not a Middle East expert, but he is a nuclear expert. And in fact, I believe you're the coordinator, you're the chairman of the Vanunu campaign in the United States?
That's correct, yes.
And you came to this a few years after it happened, because...
Indeed so, yes. Like most Americans, I heard briefly about the case when Vanunu first gave his story to the London Sunday Times back in 1986. It was a small news story in the United States.
But a big story in Sunday.
A big story over there, yes.
Yeah.
And I thought someday I ought to write about it. I'm a journalist too, just like you. But I never really got involved. It wasn't until I went over to the Middle East for the first time, that was in 1992, that I became psychologically involved. And that was principally through the work of a man named Gideon Spiro.
I know Gideon. I just saw him a few months ago.
Did you? Well, he's a very energetic guy, and he persuaded me to go down to...
Will you join us? Okay, go ahead.
Gideon Spiro, who's the head of the Israeli support group, persuaded me to go down to Ashkelon prison, and we did a demonstration there. And then I and several others organized a demonstration in front of the U.S. consulate in West Jerusalem, saying that no more nukes either in Israel or in the United States.
So it was because of your pacifist, if that's the right word to use in your case,
It's
and
not
anti-nuclear
really, anti-nuclear,
positions
really, yes.
that you realized the importance of the Vanunu case and of
That's
what this what this individual had done.
That's it exactly.
And as I understand it, he didn't do it for money. There was no payment. He didn't ask the London Sunday Times for anything.
That's
He
correct.
did this as a matter of conscience,
It is a matter of conscience.
which
And-
makes it extra good.
Right, yes. And it provides a fine example for us to try to match him. Because I think it won't take too many people acting in that kind of an absolutist, non-cooperative way, particularly people who are within the U.S. military and nuclear programs, to make a real dent in U.S. public policy. I mean, a few thousand.
Maybe the difference is you live in Madison, Wisconsin, and I live in Washington, so I'm by definition a lot more cynical about what it will take to make any
you're
changes.
inside the Beltway. Yeah. I've lived in Washington too, and I know the power here. But Washington is not the whole United States. You're true. It's very important.
I know Wisconsin. I went
Yeah.
to school at Lawrence. You're out
Yeah.
there in the heartbed of liberalism and progressivism, the Progressive magazine.
What used to be, yes. Yeah.
What
It's
used to
pretty
be.
conservative now, really. It's pretty apolitical.
The Progressive's still there. I know the editor died.
The magazine is still doing very well.
And one of the more thoughtful magazines on an
It is.
intellectual level that we have in our country.
Yes, yes.
Um,
But on the Vanunu question,
Right.
it's the idea that as a matter of principle, the Vanunu case needs to be heard about and understood in the United States.
especially,
There's been a wall of silence. It really has.
if I can make a comparison, Jonathan Pollard, a real spy in the classic sense, who did
Yeah.
it for monetary reasons and was paid
Exactly.
and bribed, and they got a bank
50,000.
account for him in Israel now. They're
Yeah.
putting more in that account than they used to pay him when he came to
Right.
the embassy as a spy.
They've written a play about him, and he's a hero.
He came to these doors asking for asylum. They didn't go that far because, after all, the United States wouldn't like that. But anyway,
Yeah.
there's this huge movement to get Jonathan Pollard out of prison so he can go live in
Indeed.
Israel.
Yes.
And here you've got a mercenary, classic spy, a
Exactly,
traitor to
yeah.
the United States.
Yeah.
Whereas in Vanunu's case, he left Israel, converted to Christianity. He never renounced his citizenship?
No, he
kept his
renounced his
citizenship.
faith.
Renounced his state.
His faith, his Jewish
Oh, his faith.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
yeah.
Right.
But no, he's still an Israeli citizen.
Then he went to England, where apparently through the movement that he had joined, a Christian movement of conscience, people helped him meet people at the Sunday Times.
No,
Is that how
it
happened?
didn't work that
Didn't
way.
work that way.
The London Sunday Times found out about him while he was still in Australia, because he was freely talking about his experience as a nuclear technician to little church groups. And the Sunday Times found out about it and flew a reporter down there.
So the press did
And
its job for a change.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. Sometimes it happens, at least in England.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good for
And
them.
they really had to kind of talk him out. He wanted to just give it anonymously. Because he felt that, that would let him off the hook.
But that's hard for the press.
That's hard for
They
the
need-
press, and they talked him into coming out publicly as a whistleblower, which he did.
So they flew him to England
Indeed, yeah, they did.
and debriefed him and investigated the story, and this went on for weeks or
Well,
months?
for weeks, I think for 2 or 3 weeks. He was kept under wraps in England, moved from hotel to hotel, while he was being interviewed not only by the staff of the Sunday Times, but by nuclear weapons experts who the Sunday Times engaged to find out if he was for real or not.
And then somehow during this period the Israelis found out about it before the publication. They tried to
That's
stop
correct.
the publication,
Yes,
as I
yes.
recall.
We believe through the London Mirror, which
Rupert Murdoch.
Rupert Murdoch, yes.
And also
No,
that
the
one who was
other
killed,
one who or killed
either
or
committed suicide or
yeah.
killed, or
Yeah,
we
Who
all
was
forget
a-
his name.
yeah.
He turned out to be a Mossad agent.
right. And-
Another example, just for the viewers who won't understand this at all.
Yeah.
A major player in British journalistic circles who owned a major newspaper, and somehow we repressed his name. He was big news at the time, and Cy Hirsch wrote a book about him, or wrote about him in his
Yeah.
book, was actually doing much of what he was doing for the Mossad. So
Yes.
he passed that on to the Mossad. The Mossad came
he
to England.
fingered Vanunu,
and
then did a debunking story ahead of time to try to
his
kind of take the
newspaper,
edge.
which
Yeah,
was the
Mirror.
Sunday Mirror,
Right, yeah,
did a debunking advance story,
correct.
working with the Israelis, but of course never.
beware the nuclear hoax.
But of course, never acknowledging that they were working with the Israelis and with the Mossad.
Would you expect them to acknowledge it?
But it's important for viewers to understand. That's why we have Mideast Realities. We're trying to explain to them that just because you pick up the Sunday paper and read something doesn't necessarily mean that it's valid. In fact, it may be part of a disinformation campaign, like it was in this case.
It could be the New York Times as well as the Sunday Times. I mean, they're the major dailies and networks, I think, essentially are in with the national security establishment.
To say the least.
Yeah.
And some of them are actually taking money, taking gifts, just like politicians.
Yeah.
So
they're trading exclusive information for scoops.
So there was a debunking story which didn't stop the Sunday Times from going forward with their story.
No, it did not. But
did the Sunday Times offer Vanunu protection? Did they contact British authorities?
They say they did their best to try to protect him by moving him from place to place, encouraging him not to stray from their sight. They provided him with accompaniment for his own protection.
They didn't provide him with a girlfriend, too.
No, I think they even tried to, but
well,
it didn't work.
Viewers will understand why I make that cynical comment in just a minute. You'll understand.
But in any event, Vanunu did get rather impatient. The story kept being delayed, and finally he did allow himself to be talked into going to Rome to get a change of scene with this woman who had looked him up. And
just 1 second before the woman. This is Mideast Realities. I'm Mark Brzezinski. We'll be right back with Sam Day, who's chairman of the Mordechai Vanunu campaign in the United States. But now, a short break for the quote of the week. We're back. I'm Mark Brzezinski, your host. This is Sam Day from Madison, Wisconsin, chairman of the Vanunu campaign. Long-time activist, I have a feeling. For longer than myself.
Well, maybe 20 or 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sam's been telling us an extraordinary story of a gentleman of conscience who's now in a 6x9 solitary confinement cell in Israel, who we should all be wanting to get out. And it will be a sorry day if Jonathan Pollard is let out and Mordechai Vanunu is kept in, even though one cannot compare the two people.
They're not comparable, no.
But
although there is a connection that I can explain to you.
Okay, let's hear the connection.
The connection is that if Clinton allows himself to be talked into releasing Jonathan Pollard, as Yitzhak Rabin and others are imploring him to do, he should not even consider doing that unless the Israelis at least first release Mordechai Vanunu.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But let's be brutally candid to our viewers. When it comes to matters relating to the Middle East, especially relating to Israel, Bill Clinton is their boy.
That's correct.
They infiltrated his campaign. They joked behind the scenes that they had a dozen people in his Little Rock headquarters. They brought him to Washington because they didn't want George Bush here. I mean, they helped. They were a significant force to do so. They run his Middle East policy.
All Democratic presidents, really.
But never as bad as this one. They got him to assign the national security job, the Middle East national security job, to a man who not only was an Israeli lobby stooge, but to a man who during the campaign wasn't even an American citizen. He was an Australian. And then when they saw that Clinton was going to win, they quickly whisked through his citizenship and had the audacity to put two Israelis right in the White House, one working on national security affairs, one working on political affairs. Now, whatever one's view of American politics, and for a president like Clinton to come out against special interests and pretend to be independent and pretend to be doing what's right for America, when we all know that on Israeli Middle East issues, he's nothing more...
Yeah.
I'm sorry to have to say it this way, he's a stooge of the Israelis, and a great actor, and he loves to hold these ceremonies, but he does what he's told. So the idea that he's going to consider justice and fairness on this issue, he's going to do what the Israelis want him to do.
I wouldn't dispute that. He would have released Pollard had it not been for the fact that the military lobby happens to be stronger than the Israeli lobby.
Agreed. And besides that, I suspect he has told Rabin under the table that when he can, he will. For instance, if he's elected to a second term, would you or I be surprised if Johnny Pollard, during the first year of that second term, somehow was taken to a plane and sent away?
Well, he'll be eligible for parole, very soon. And it could just happen in the normal course of events.
So, I mean, it will happen.
Yeah.
But Vanunu,
right.
Vanunu
Not
doesn't...
that I'm against Pollard's being released. I don't think he should be held either. But,
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Why not?
I don't believe in long prison terms serve any useful purpose at all.
All right.
Certainly not a life term.
That's a very... the reason he got a life term...
Of any life.
But there too, and I'm not making a judgment on the merits, but let's explain that he got a life term because the military and the intelligence people say the secrets he gave away were so significant as to cause the deaths of many people. So he didn't get it just for turning over secrets. He got it for turning over secrets which he knew were so important that others were going to suffer and lose their lives.
Yeah,
but this is not about Johnny Pollard. This is, in fact, it's not really just about Mordechai Vanunu. It's really about nuclear weapons in our world. And that's how you got
That's the bottom line, yes.
It's really about the fact that we've just learned that this country threatened Saddam Hussein to use them during the 91 war, when there was no reason in the world, there was no military contents. The Israelis have twice threatened to use nuclear weapons.
And we have threatened many times, not just for the first time in Iraq, but we threatened in Korea, we threatened in Vietnam, and I think on a number of other occasions too.
And it's threats like that which cause governments in Iran, in North Korea, and other places in the world to say the Americans are the greatest hypocrites in the world. They not only have them in huge numbers, but they actually threaten to use them, and then when we say we need some to protect ourselves, they treat us as if we are the world's greatest ogres.
Exactly. We use them actually in the same way that a bank robber uses a gun. He doesn't need to shoot the gun, he just needs to put it in front of the teller's head to get the money.
And in the Middle East,
we use weapons in the same way, really.
And in the Middle East, the nuclear arms race is really just beginning. I interviewed for this program Mohammed Said Ahmed in Egypt, in Cairo, a few months ago. And he's a great analyst. He's the one who wrote the book in the 70s, When the Guns Fall Silent, predicting a peace with Israel. But he doesn't support this peace, and he still won't meet with Israelis in Cairo. But he said the reality is our region is in the beginning of a nuclear arms race, and the Israelis will not be allowed, even by the most moderate Arab governments, to be the sole possessors of nuclear arms.
That's right, and the Israelis have only themselves to blame for that.
And us. We helped them.
Well, we helped them, but basically we're covering for them, but they, like the South Africans, they did it essentially unaided. We provide cover for them diplomatically. And
I think we looked the other way when they stole some material from Pennsylvania, as I remember the story of Israel's nuclear development. It's in Cy Hirsch's book.
Yeah, there's different stories about the Pennsylvania thing, but the bottom line is that no modern country needs to get any help from anybody else to build credible nuclear weapons.
And actually, I'd say that what the war with Iraq was all about was weapons of mass destruction. The Iraqis were the force that was going to build them. Pakistanis have built them. Libyans have tried. Iranians are doing so. Whatever denials they make, that's the standard denial. And 10 or 20 years from now, when the current peace process, either you're more optimistic than I, you think it may lead to a more stable situation, I think it's a ruse that will not only unravel but potentially bring things back in a worse way down the road. And I'm reminded of the peace to end all peace, the 1914 peace, where the 1918-1919 Paris Peace Conference, which David Fromkin has written about, calling it the peace to end all peace. When the Western world insisted they had structured a stable, lasting peace, but in reality they had connived against justice and against reason to carve the Middle East into spheres of influence, and it brought us generations of chaos, which we are still living through. That's when Iraq and Kuwait were carved up from each other.
That's right.
So,
Most wars are written, the pieces are written by the winners of wars, and they very seldom last very long, create more problems than they settle.
But here you are in front of an American audience. I wish it were national television. I wish we were a network. I wish this was not just public access television, although public access is a very interesting, novel forum that makes it possible for us to do this. I'm going to uncharacteristically keep quiet and let you talk to the audience. You've devoted years of your life already to this, and you're leaving for England tonight and then for Israel. Go ahead and talk to the audience. Tell them why they should be involved in this.
Okay, my bottom line really is a famous quotation by Albert Einstein, who said that with the unleashing of the power of the atom, everything changed except our way of thinking, and so we drift towards inevitable disaster. What he meant by that was that when we learned how to harness the nuclear power, we got control over forces that are so much beyond our ability to understand, that we're sort of like children playing with dynamite. We simply do not comprehend in our minds, let alone master in our political processes, this kind of destructive power. So that when we learned how to harness the power of the atomic bomb, and then use the atomic bomb as another form of weaponry, another form of diplomacy, we brought about a nuclear arms race which led us to where we are now. It's a little bit down in numbers from what it was at its height in the late 1980s, but we have still some 18 to 20,000 nuclear weapons, some of them more than 1,000 times more destructive than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima, which was itself 1,000 times more destructive than any previous bomb. And yet we devise policies that contemplate the use or the threatened use of these weapons of mass destruction. It would take the dropping of only 2 or 3, hopefully on an American city, if they have to be dropped at all, to so shock this country that we would forthwith cease the production of all nuclear weapons. We would get out of the nuclear business entirely and totally and immediately, because we'd be talking about perhaps the loss of Washington, D.C., including the Jewish Committee on the Middle East and just about everything else in Washington.
Thanks for the plug. The viewers don't know too much about that because I have another hat sometimes,
right.
But one day I'll tell them.
And the loss of my hometown, which is Madison, Wisconsin, would be nothing but a hole in the ground. All my grandchildren, all my sons, and millions of other grandchildren and sons and husbands. And what I'm saying is that we need somehow to come to a form of sanity before that happens. And that's the challenge facing us Americans now in this generation.
Hold that thought for just a minute. I'm Mark Brzezinski. You're watching Mideast Realities. We'll be right back with Sam Day from Madison, Wisconsin, chairperson of the Vanunu campaign in this country. And right now, a quick break for the lie of the week. We're back. We're outside the Israeli embassy, actually. There's been a demonstration today, which happens every year, and a smaller one every month, for Mordechai Vanunu. Let's just call him right now the Israeli prisoner of conscience, nuclear prisoner of conscience.
Yeah.
And we have the good fortune, before you get on a plane and leave for England and Israel tonight, to be talking to Sam Day, who is expressing his overall feelings that Mordechai Vanunu as an individual, terribly important, but the nuclear whistle that he blew is what brings us all together,
You
including
say it
me.
better than I could.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm here every week, so I'm going to let you continue.
Okay. And that nuclear whistle is a whistle that needs to be blown not just in little Israel far away, but loud and clear here in the United States, which is essentially the leader in this march towards doomsday. And if the nuclear weapons are to be stopped and reversed, it's going to have to happen in the United States, which is where they began, and where they are developed to the nth degree, both in quality and in quantity.